Bien, bonjour et bonsoir à tous. Good evening to all. And good evening. We begin tonight by tackling the fundamental question about our country. Does Cameroon have a political philosophy? Many believe we have a nation of pragmatists. They argue that since the 1960s, our leaders, our people have simply done what seems to work at the time: unify, centralize, survive economic shock, and maintain stability. In this view, our politics are theoretical, unguided, driven solely by the context, immediate needs, and the management of inherited crises. No deep ideas, just survival. Yet, I am reminded of former British Prime Minister Thatcher, who once said that Europe was created by history, but America was created by philosophy. If a nation of settlers across an ocean was guided by idea, what about us? I suggest that from the perspective of an outsider, and perhaps even to the frustrated citizen that I am, there is a profound, albeit contradictory, philosophical content that defines the idea of Cameroon. We are not just a collection of administrative zones. We were conceived, at least in theory, by philosophical informed architects. The question becomes then, what is this philosophy? If America was shaped by the Protestant Reformation and the Enlightenment, Cameroon was framed by the principle of national sovereignty, a reaction against colonialism, and the inherent and often I'm sorry. The question becomes, what is the philosophy? If America was shaped by the Protestant Reformation and the Enlightenment, Cameroon was framed by the principle of national sovereignty, a reaction against colonialism, and the inherent and often conflicting legal principle of civil laws and common law. These two seeds grew into a powerful, living, and often painful political experiment. This philosophy tells us not only who we are, but what frame our current politics. It is a philosophy built on a paradox. The first paradox, the philosophy of unity and control, a powerful francophone derived doctrine of the unitary state, l'état unitaire, where sovereignty is indivisible and centralized in the interest of the nation cohesion. The second paradox, the philosophy of right and limit, the constitutional promise of individual liberty, equality, and due process, principle meant to limit the very power of the state. Cameroon is the field where those two great contending ideas clash. The first element we must assess as we look into the political thought is liberalism. Of course, that's the first one I was acquainted to as a young college student. Now, let's be clear. I am not speaking of a political party. I am speaking of the philosophical construct that places the individual at its center. It entails concept like personal autonomy, equality, and the necessity of consent for legitimate authority. In Cameroon, we have seen two forms of this thought emerge in a very, very distorted way. First, minimal state liberalism, the illusion, basically. The idea that the government should always stay out of most activities. We see rhetoric about private enterprise and deregulation. But this minimal state never fully materialized. The state hands is always heavy, always present. The second form that emerged out of this ideas of liberalism is the active state liberalism. That's the reality of Cameroon. The notion that the government must intervene to ensure that the public goods, to ensure the public good and deliver the promise of liberty. And what are those promises? The welfare, infrastructure, education. We have an extremely active state. Too much. One that regulates our economy, run our university, and control even our media. But here is the paradox we must confront. The Cameroonian state is active, yet often profoundly non-liberal. It intervenes everywhere, but often fails to deliver the rights and accountability that true activist state philosophy demands. The result is a system of active control, not active care. By the way, of course, you will see that because I use a lot of reference also to healthcare because I'm a healthcare provider. You know, I'm a healthcare professional myself also. Finally, our course in Cameroonian political thought will be guided by 5 recurring themes. The 5 national tensions that refuse to disappear. First, the exceptionalism of crisis. What do I mean by that? The belief that Cameroon is special, a carrefour, l'Africa miniature, a stable haven that blinds us from the deeply internal fracture. Special, exceptional. Impossible n'est pas camerounais. Second, those tensions basically on theme. The malleability of identity. Yes, identity is very malleable in Cameroon. How the definition of Anglophone and Francophone, North or South, are constantly changed, twisted, or suppressed to meet the political needs of the moment. In previous video, I talk about Galina, Tontina, North, South, Bamileke, Garwa, Nordist, Fabrication, Tiroma, Fabrication, the AMSA is part of it. The third tension, the cycle of reconstitution. Why every crisis, the 1972 crisis, the 1990 crisis, and today, in 2025, those crises, why every crisis is a forced philosophical reckoning that is either ignored or badly excused. The fourth tension, the contested people. The struggle to define what I can use, allow me to use the expression, we the people. Was he the 50-something member that emerged out of leaders that emerged in Fumban, the conference in Fumban in 1972? Or does it include the farmer in Bamenda, the student in Yaoundé, and then the merchant in Logonichari or in Marwa, Garwa, or Kuseri? And the fifth tension is the tyranny of space. The notion of space, I reflect on it. The dynamic between the central seat of power and the periphery. This, I will argue later, is our most original and most painful philosophical contribution. The inability to grant psychological space for difference and decentralized power. The space. Anyway, we'll come back a little later. Tonight, we commit to talking about where we came from so we can finally understand where we are and where we must go. We must stop treating our politics as merely administrative chaos and start seeing it as a philosophical background. This is finally what emerged from our observation of the post-political crisis of 2025 and my observation of American politics since my teenage years. I know Cameroon politics since my teenage years. I thank you so much for your attention. I hope you enjoyed the first speech entitled The Paradox of the Foundation, Idea versus Reality. The conundrum, is Cameroon just a pragmatic state, I ask. In the first part, I talk about the conundrum. In the second part of my speech, I talk about the breathing contradiction between the living contradiction. In the third section of that, I talk about liberalism in a non-liberal context. In the fourth, I talk about the 5 crises of the Cameroonian soul. I named them. I don't need to come back on it. Thank you so much. I appreciate you so much for taking the time to listen to these speeches. And I hope you'll follow me again for the second speech, and hopefully the third speech for tonight. I think we'll see how time. Thank you so much.